Okay, let's try this. Hi, I'm TBSkyen. If you know who I am and you've managed to find this somehow, well, good job. That's well done to you and the YouTube algorithm, I suppose, which must have figured out that it was me and showed me to you because you might be interested. If you don't know who I am, that's probably for the best. Don't worry about it so much. But basically, I kind of want to do anime reaction content. But I have two problems. Number one, anime reaction content relies a lot on a creator actually being on camera, so that like people can see your reactions to the thing. And I don't go on camera. I don't like it. So that's a problem for me. And the other problem is that you can't put reaction content on YouTube because if you put more than 5 consecutive seconds of any anime on screen, lawyers will like ninjas, lawyers, sniper assassins on the roof on the opposite side of the street. You will be targeted by things, and it's unpleasant, and it can put your whole goddamn channel at risk, fraudulently and like in keeping with actual copyright law. And I don't fucking want to fucking deal with that. So, what I did when Arcane came out, because a lot of people wanted me to, was that I recorded myself reacting to the episodes, like along with like a time code on screen, and then people can sort of like, hey, when I press play, you press play, and then we're watching the episode together, and you kind of get my reactions as they happen. I'm going to try and do that again here. So what you have in the upper left corner is the time code of the first episode of Hime-sama Gomu no Jikan desu, or just Time for Torture Princess, I think they localized it as. And I'm going to press play. And then I'm going to let it play until something interesting happens that I want to talk about. And then I'm going to press pause. And then you press pause. And then I talk and say the reaction. I do my reacting to the thing that's happening. And then you listen to that. And then we press play, the both of us at the same time when I'm done with that. And then we keep watching the episode together. And then hopefully we have like a good time just kind of watching an anime together and shooting the shit. It's a little one-sided because you can't talk back to me. But, you know, that's what we're doing here. That's the concept. That's the idea. Mostly just because I fucking want to talk about some anime, and I want to talk about this anime in particular because "'Tis Time for Torture Princess" is a manga that I followed for a long time, for quite a while. I found it on TikTok of all places, which like had these slideshows that were popular for a time, with just like where people just upload entire manga chapters as slideshows, and it's like, oh, this is a recommendation. Yeah, no, it's not a recommendation. It's piracy. But I did manage to find "'Tis Time for Torture Princess," which I was quite fond of. Very happy to see because it's very good. It's interesting. It's one of those sort of gag mangas things with those sort of a cozy vibe to it, but one, at least which I found, had some interesting things going on under the surface. Like it's actually kind of about something underneath the silly premise and all of the nonsense that's going on. And we're probably gonna get into that. Like, I'm wordy. I have ADHD. Bet you couldn't tell. So who knows? The episode itself is 23 minutes. This could be well over an hour. Let's see. I'm about to press the play button. I'm going to give you a countdown, and you find the anime on whatever legal means of finding the anime you have. Load the episode up. Put the timer at 0.00 whatever, like right at the first shot when blue sky and there's a bird circling thing. And we're going to start playing in 3, 2, 1. And that's where we'll pause for our first thing. So this is like the cold open of the episode, right? And that's a thing like that. I mean, I haven't reread the beginning of the manga, but like to the best of my recollection, that wasn't in the manga at all. Like this is something anime exclusive that they've kind of added to the thing to function as a cold open, right? And you can see the way in which this cold open is constructed, like so many other like anime often do, is that this is like, okay, let's just throw a bunch of sakuga on the screen and sort of catch a visual interest in a casual viewer who like otherwise might see this thing and go, why should I care about this? Why should I care about this? Well, let's throw something visually impressive and very engaging on the screen so that like the people go, oh, okay, cool, it's like anime sword fighting princess, like in the fantasy, oh, all right, sit down, watch that. Oh, it's some really impressive, she's flying around, swinging sword and stuff. And that's, I feel mixed about it a little bit because the premise of the anime, as we shall see, is that there's this war going on between humans and demons. It's like it's Dragon Quest o'clock, right? Like there's a demon lord, he's attacking the human world, and then the human empire with princess fantasy fighting, blah blah going on. That's sort of the backdrop, and then the reality of the show is this very very cozy vibes, absolutely no stakes comedy gag manga about a princess who's just kind of eating nice treats and making friends and having a good time. It's very reminiscent in that sense of what's it called, the Princess Can't Sleep in the Castle thing that came out a couple of years ago, which I really really loved. And what the cold open here does, and something that also kind of happens in the OP of the anime, is that it sort of draws attention to the fact that there's a war going on, and that the princess, who is sort of sitting in the dungeon being air quotes tortured, having all these fun, good feeling, fun time vibes with pals and friends, has been like murdering guys, like just like slashing them open with her sword so that they bleed and then they die. She's been doing that a lot, just absolutely murdering the hell out of people. And there's a war happening with torment and torture and suffering and misery and God knows what else. And it's little... I understand the purpose of the cold open is it's part of the setup for the joke, right? Like we get this very serious anime thing of like this princess leading the army, she's killing thing. And the setup then for the joke is how low stakes and silly the actual thing is as we begin to learn the true personality of our princess. But it's a little risky drawing attention because like for me, that's one of those things that's like, oh, I probably shouldn't think about that. Like over the course of this anime, I should probably not be thinking at any point about how soldiers are like fighting and dying because of what's going, like that human beings' lives are being ended. And that's me obviously taking it too seriously, but it is like it's that risk of poking the bear of suspension of disbelief a little bit. That's like an interesting creative risk. Like the anime does do the fun thing of like it opens with this cold open and then it replays the exact same cold open afterwards, but we get to see inside the spoilers for the episode, by the way. There's going to be a lot of those. I'm going to spoil stuff that's happening later in the episode here because I've already watched it. Maybe in the future I'll watch it clean to get like the first time reaction thing. Too late now, but anyway, at the end of the episode, we get the same cold open played again, exactly the same, except we get the princess's internal monologue, which undercuts the seriousness of everything that's happening, and that's like, okay, we're bringing the tone back down to a level where it's like, okay, that, yeah, there's a war happening, don't worry about it, though, it's not a real war, don't worry about it, don't think about it. So there's that. Then there's the Sakuga, because one of the things that made me want to talk about the show is that it's actually really well animated. Like, genuinely, it is really well animated in a lot of places. We'll talk about that as we get to the actual torture scenes, air quotes. And that's sort of... I mean, obviously, there are still shows that come out with absolutely terrible animation, like roast videos made about them every year, but it is a thing of, like... I feel like this level of Sakuga, like this level of high-skilled technical animation is becoming more and more commonplace, more and more expected, which like doubtless is part of the immiseration of the animation industry in Japan and like the suffering that those poor people are put through for absolutely no fucking money, which, God, they can't unionize fast enough, except you kind of can't do that very easily in Japan because quasi-fascist hell state. Boy, once you look into the history of the LDP and their ties to far right, like American hypercapitalism and militarism and the denial of war crimes. Like, it's no wonder labor conditions in Japan are absolutely turbo fucked, because, like, what else was the United States going to leave them with after World War II? Anyway, we've gone off topic a little bit. We're watching a princess anime about, like, food and cozy vibes and stuff. Let's click the play button before I start diverging into Marxist theory or something. 3, 2, 1, click. It's awfully nice of them to let her be imprisoned with her sword, by the way. I love the little pig creatures, by the way. I love their character design. It's so nice to see fantasy creatures in fantasy anime sometimes. Okay, pausing again here. Some character design notes, right? One of the things about okay, "'Tis time for Torture Princess." My cats are making a racket out there. "'Tis time for Torture Princess" is that its fundamentals are actually really strong. Like, its grasp of, like, character design language in order to, like, to do character storytelling is actually genuinely really strong. And it's one of those things, like, you don't really notice it unless you're paying attention to it, I don't think. Because it's indulging in so many tropes, right? It's so many, again, it's Dragon Quest o'clock. It's so many of those, like, generic fantasy RPG tropes that are being used, but they're being used effectively. And so one of the places where you'll see that is in the contrasting character design of the princess and the torturer, right? That the princess has long, flowing blonde hair. She has close cropped black hair. The princess has blue eyes. She has red eyes. The princess has, like, a girly face with no visible makeup. She has, like, and big eyes. She has narrow eyes, like, with like visible makeup and a much more adult vibe. The princess is dressed consistently as, like, a fantasy medieval kind of character. She's dressed in essentially a sort of riff on a modern business office woman thing, and she actually has kind of, like, relative to the princess, somewhat of like a less what you would call traditionally feminine vibe than the princess does, right? Like, because she's wearing a collared shirt with, like, the tie and, like, the thing going on. So it's like, and that's all visual contrast, right? Like, that's all meant to establish these two characters are the opposite of one another, right? Like, that there is this sheer divide between them that can't, like, that they are each other's contrasting total opposites. Which, of course, is the joke, is that they're not, as we shall see as the show goes on. They're not at all opposites. And in fact, they're very much alike in a lot of very entertaining ways. Anyway, 3, 2, 1, play. I'm going to cut in again, pausing once more. Speaking of character design, the sword, X. Another interesting bit of character design, actually, because, like, it's a talking sword with magic power, like, again, a classic fantasy trope thing, and as a design for a weapon, it is unexceptional in a lot of ways, like, in the sense that is, oh yeah, that's a highly sort of ornate, very detailed fantasy sword of the sort that you see in the hands of a fantasy hero. Sure, nothing to it there. But what's interesting is the role that X plays in the story, which is that of a straight man, right? X is the straight man who's reacting primarily to the ridiculous shenanigans that are going on around him. And so it's like in the manga, there's a lot the artist does, like with sort of posing, framing, and like the way that they present the sword to provide it with feeling, right? Like to give its expressions and its reactions some sort of, and speaking of reactions, I'm doing like reaction content, like to give it personality, even though it is an inanimate object, right? And the anime has to do the same thing, but it can't use all the same techniques that the manga does, right? Like it has to use the available visual language of anime to give this sword expression, so that when we do the Kuleshov thing of like cutting from a thing happening to a reaction shot from the sword, that we as the audience feel, oh, the sword is disappointed or dismayed or frustrated or like is having the appropriate reaction to the thing. And like the anime, this is another thing that kind of surprised me, does a really good job of like using its visual language, and I'll try and point it out as we go, to give the sword that personality, but interestingly, without ever, at least not in the first episode, without ever breaking into full-on cartooning. In the sense like of like when you think of like a talking sword in a cartoon, like maybe you'd put a great big pair of googly eyes on it. Maybe you'd like make the sword like jump around and like bend and like sway and like do things. And what the anime so far, like maybe that'll change in the future, but something I very much liked in the first episode is that it remains shape consistent. Like they don't break the model. They do framing, they do posing, they add some effects over top of it, but it remains like a rigid sword, which is an object, right? Like not an animated character that moves like it's in a Disney movie. And I like that. That's just a little thing that I quite liked about this. Anyway, playing back in 3, 2, 1, click. There, like a reaction shot of the sword, twisted with a Dutch angle and like close up to, right. The voice actor also does a really good job with the sword. Love the lighting in that shot. Also, a small Sakuga thing, they didn't, like, what I would expect from a shot like that, I'm not pausing, by the way, the reveal of the toast, I would expect 3D animation. They didn't do that. Okay, I'm going to pause now, because I apparently need to talk about that more than just a passing comment. The use of 3D effects in the anime's first episode have also been really tasteful, because it's there. It's been there once in the show already. You might have spotted it, which is when the cell door opens. The cell door is 3D animated, which gives it like a really smooth opening action, but it's like very much not noticeable. I would have expected for a shot like that that's like slowly zooming in on like a centered object with like a really tight focus as the doors open around it into the toast. That's where I would have expected 3D. Like, I really kind of would have expected that, like, maybe not the toast itself, maybe that would have been hand animated to sort of keep the aesthetic of it, but that the Iron Maiden itself and the plate and shit like that, just to keep it visually consistent across a really smooth, slow camera move, would have been 3D animated. That's the kind of shot that, like, you often turn to 3D for, because otherwise it's a whole fuck ton of busy work to create, like, a believable, like, push-in that sense, without really getting that much like reward, air quotes, out of spending so much labor time on such a simple shot. But no, it's that seems, at least on my cursory inspection, to be completely hand animated, which I think is kind of delightful. Like that's like, we talked about Sakuga in like the cold open. There's also instances of like Sakuga happening here in the episode where like some animators clearly went rather fucking above and beyond for like above and beyond what I would have expected. And like often shows like this, they front load their animation budgets, right? Like most of the animation budget is focused on like the early parts of the season, because that's when they hook people in. And then by the later parts of the season, when people are bought in, when people have sunk like time and effort into caring about this world and these characters, that's when they sort of ease off on the animation budgets and things get a little bit less spectacular, because now people are hooked in and we don't have to make so much effort, and then we're saving our animation budget for the big blowout in the last episode or whatever. That's how it often goes, right? So maybe that'll happen with this show as well. But I just wanted to call out that little bit of like the camera pushing in on the thing, like that slow zooming shot, dolly shot thing. That's some good Sakuga. Like that's the kind of Sakuga that I really like to see, because I'm weird. Anyway, playing back in 3, 2, 1. Oh, now it's the OP, of course. And again, the OP, I feel like it's a little bit of a mistake, a little bit, to call attention to the war. Like, again, sort of, hey, it feels like the anime is kind of reminding, yeah, there's actually a war going on. People are dying in horrible torment and pain while this fun stuff is happening. Like, it feels like a tonal thing. Like, it feels like a bit of a tonal thing. But, pausing again, because, God, okay, this really is going to be an hour, isn't it? Character design, once again, the difference between the princess in her battle uniform and the princess as the character she is when she's imprisoned. Note the difference in the way that her facial features are presented. Note the difference in like the sharpness of how she's presented versus the softness, like the rounded shapes and like the lack of edges that exist in her prison. Like, that's a very good little flip between the two sides of the character, which is a motif that repeats over the course of the OP. Is like, oh, the characters have multiple sides to them, blah blah. Very simple, basic. It's not an OP that particularly impresses me. And again, I don't know that I think it's a good idea to keep calling attention to the war when the whole show is kind of about not thinking about the war. Because part of the thematic underpinnings of the show, which is part of why I really like the manga, is that it's about, like, it's not really about a war happening. It's about like the pressure to maintain a certain aesthetic and affect for the approval of other people versus being authentically who you are and finding happiness in that. And that's part of what the show is about, which is why it's good. Anyway, let's just watch the fucking OP. I'll shut up. Playing back in 3, 2, 1. Another little tasteful use of 3D for that shot there. And again, she's just murdering dogs there. Like, maybe don't show her murdering dogs and killing guys. I love the Demon King, by the way. We don't get to see him in this episode much, but I really like him. God, it looks good, though. Again, note, like, the way that they're animating the sword, he doesn't bend, he doesn't sway, he's stiff as a board because he's a sword. And it's all framing. And again, Sakuga, like the princess having her little explanation moments. I'm gonna pause again. So the prince, like, we get this recurring gag setup thing of like the sword is like a toast that's never gonna, and then the princess is like, oh my god, I want the toast, and then he's like, what, princess? And she's like, no, wait, as she does the explanation. Like, that's the setup, that's the recurring gag here. But one thing I noticed, and another thing that's sort of like they're pouring a bunch of animation budget into this first episode, which is the other thing. This is a gag manga. It doesn't need a big animation budget. It really doesn't. Like, there's no need really for Sakuga in a show like this because it's a series of static visual gags. That's enough. And yet there's a whole bunch of really good character animation going on here that makes the princess especially really, really endearing. And her explanation scenes, like this recurring gag where like she gets tempted by a thing and then tries to explain it away to the sword, they don't, as far as I could tell, like on a cursory inspection at least, they don't seem to be reusing animation. Like, they're not doing canned animations here. It's not like every time the gag recurs, she does the same flailing explanation animation. They seem to have made custom ones for each instance of this thing happening, which is like, again, that's a corner that could so easily be cut, but they haven't done that, and it's lovely. It's like I spend a bunch of time like just looking through those animation bits frame by frame and kind of go, should I do an animation breakdown about this? Because like they're really nice, like the way that they play with the frame rate of her movement and shit like that. It's really nice. It's like the little flailing let me explain sword, I definitely not tempted thing. Really fun, really charming. Anyway, 3, 2, 1, playback. Food porn. Again, how the personality they give the sword. Very good. I genuinely, that would probably, if I was being tortured like this, I would give in. Like, it's the fact that inside of the toasted crunchy, it's the dough is still like gooey. Oh my god. Oh, I want a big, really fucking thick slice of toast so bad. A little bit of Christian iconography. The show uses lighting very well as well. Because, like, again, oh god, I have to pause again. Shit, I should have known that it would be like this. I thought, I can let the video play for 5 minutes without saying shit. Surely I can. I'm not that ADHD. No, I am. Lighting. This is, like, not in an exceptional way. Nothing that other shows aren't also capable of doing and often do. But the show is very good about using its lighting with intentionality. Like when the princess like is in her, damn it, I'm being tortured so hard, they're coming, like the dramatic lighting, like they add that little sort of almost like a VHS effect, like that little sort of camera blur thing as like to sort of add that heightened sense of drama to it. They like saturate the colors, they make everything sort of pop a lot more. And then we cut back to the torture and it's like the lighting is just flat. Like that's just flat anime lighting. And that those shifts in like the way that we shift from one art style to another in order to accentuate the joke, again, basic humor anime stuff. It's not something other shows don't do, but this show just does it really well. Like it's really good at judging when can we punctuate a joke by using these dramatic lighting gags, right? Like same thing with like the first reveal of the toast. That dramatic lighting as the thing slides open. That's a very well judged use of that like dramatic lighting thing, is like because it's easy to overuse and it's easy to use it at the wrong moments. Lots of comedy anime do this. This one doesn't, and I just thought that's neat, so I wanted to tell you about it. Yeah. 3, 2, 1, play. Food porn. They do shy away from being entirely fetishistic about it, though. Like it would have been easy to sort of have fetish bait going on, and I think they shy away from that. Like they don't sexualize it entirely. Just a little bit. but the focus is on the pleasure of eating, right? And then again, I'm going to pause here again because returning to the point of the lighting, we cut from inside the cell, which is like flat lit. It looks like any teenager's bedroom, like it's lit like any teenager's bedroom in an anime. And then as the princess is screaming and we cut down the hallway to the prison, then the lighting is dramatic. Then all the textures are extra rendered. Like you can see like the rough stonework and like, oh, this is like damp and dark and and you hear screaming at the end of the hallway. That's the gag, obviously. The joke is that cutting outside of the prison listening to her scream, it sounds like she's actually being tortured because that's what's happening. That's the gag. But again, well judged to go, yeah, we need a shot here where the lighting is all like dark and like dramatic in order to accentuate the joke. And it's also just, it really looks good is the other thing. Like it's, because a lot of, again, anime that are not high production value, anime that are not very good at using lighting gags in that sense, they often also have really ugly lighting. Like when they try to do the lighting gag, like when they try to do it, it looks really ugly. Like it's not very well judged with the colors and like the contrast and the values that they choose. This one is, I think. Like there's some really interesting like rainbow fringing going on around the torchlights, especially down like at the bottom of the floor. Like it's a compelling, good looking scene on its own. Besides being an element in a gag, it just looks good. Like that's just a really well drawn background that we're looking at, which I just appreciate. Anyway, back to playback. 3, 2, 1, play. Dramatic lighting once again, changing and rendering. Another lighting gag, well judged. Another framing of the sword that really emphasizes its emotion, good. Again, they here pausing once again. Here they add the little effect of like the boiling lines, like that the outline of the sword is like wobbly because it's so defeated and so like, oh my god, what the fuck am I looking at? And they change it to black and white to accentuate like its feelings as a character, but they don't break it. They don't mess with it. They don't break the model. They keep the sword consistently in its shape and its size and its rigidness. And it's like, that's actually hard. Like it's actually hard to frame these shots correctly and like to judge the pacing of like how you cut between them and the effects that you apply to get that emotional affect out of what is ultimately an inanimate object, right? And I just think they're doing a good job. Like that's a thing which is like, when it's done well, you don't notice it, but it's not actually trivial to achieve. Back to playback. 3, 2, 1, play. Again, that push in on the sword to good. The little turn, it's good. It's a good reveal, like the little slide over, and then there's a fully modern takoyaki stand. It's a good gag. Again, the voice actor for the sword is doing so well. Okay, so here I'm pausing again, because this is the thing that, like, this is what I think elevates "'Tis Time for Torture Princess" above a bunch of other sort of gag mangas, is that what it's actually about is the princess beginning to reclaim a childhood that has been taken away from her by, like, the strictures of her position, right? Like, that she's always been expected to be the princess, the battle princess, like this perfect, unconquerable hero of the kingdom, blah blah blah, etc. But she's had this constant feeling of loss of normal experiences with normal people, like being able to just participate in the simple pleasures of life. And the show is about, like, thematically about, for her at least, her slowly beginning to reclaim, essentially having another chance to have a childhood while she's imprisoned in the demon castle, and the friends that she's making are the people who are torturing her. Like, that's the gag, right? That's the silly premise of the thing. But the serious thing that's underneath it is that it is genuinely about, like, what happens to a person when you deny them the simple pleasures in life forever, like for their whole life, when you tell them that the simple pleasures that they crave are sinful or wrong, or like the inappropriate for them, they're not allowed to have them. And that has a lot of, like, interactions with, like expectations that are put on people in public positions, obviously, but also like women in general. Like, there's a lot of public pressure in terms of, like, how they're allowed to like chase after pleasure, and just like many people, the ways that we're allowed to chase after pleasure and stuff, like, that's all stuff that's heavily strictured, like that's under heavy scrutiny and censure by society around us. And that's sort of what the emotional core of the show is. And that it's, and I'm not trying to oversell it, it's still a gag show. Like, it's a comedy gag manga, and it's a gag show. It's about doing funny jokes, ha ha ha, over and over again. But the thing that makes it more interesting to me than most gag mangas is that there is that little kernel of, like, a slightly more emotionally serious core underneath it that informs all the comedy. And that's what I quite like about it. But anyway, back to playback. 3, 2, 1, play. Compare and contrast, by the way, how this show visualizes the pleasure of eating something delicious versus how that, what was it called, that fucking cooking anime show where, like, when people eat delicious food, they come or whatever, like their clothes fall off. This show has such a better approach to actually visualizing the pleasure of, like, a good meal, rather than simply, oh, it's like an orgasm, which is like which is so basic and, like, kind of cheap a way to do it, where this, like, has a much more, I think, inventive and interesting approach to like showing the visual pleasure, like showing visually the pleasure that she gets. See, reclaiming childhood. She gets to be a child now, and that's that's how they tempt her, right? It's not just with pleasure, it's with I love the Hell Lord so much. He's so good. He's a kind of a terrible character design, but we'll talk about that when he shows up in the next episode. Maybe. Again, note the sharpness of the princess's character design when she's in serious mode versus what happens when she gives in. By the way they do the lighting in that shot is like they like watercolor her hair or something. It's gorgeous. And now she's round and soft. Very appealing animation. I'm not familiar enough with ramen to know how good that is, but the anime really makes it look good. Again, the Sakuga of like her tottering animation, she's falling backwards, like the way her feet are moving across the ground. It's like it's really well animated. Like it's a really good sense of weight and like movement and gravity. It's like, oh, Ooh, cliffhanger, dramatic. I really like the visual style of the ending, though. Like, it's this ballpoint pen, like, rough lining thing with, like, lovely little implied shapes. It's just a really charming, cute little visual style to have on it. And I think it matches the tone of the show better than the OP, frankly. Because, again, it doesn't draw attention to the war. And it also reveals some of the strength of the character design in the show. Like, because, again, series of constant tropes and fantasy, like Dragon Quest tropes and things like that. It's very basic in that way, but when you can recognize the characters so well, even in those extremely simplified little doodle forms, like that's generally the sign of like a character design that has, even if it has flaws, like it has strong differentiation, right? Like it makes the characters like strong visual elements in combination with one another. Like that's a good test for whether or not you have a strong character design is, can you reduce it to like a really simple doodle and it's still like visibly recognizable and like distinguishable next to the other character designs in your story. That's a good little sort of rule of thumb test. Anyway, this is the thing we talked about earlier, is like they open with this cold open that presents the princess in the way that she's like this dramatic fantasy hero thing, and then now we get her internal monologue where she's thinking about playing video games and, oh god, I have a stitch in my side. But it also touches on, again, like that emotional core thing that I was wabbling on about some minutes ago, that so much of her emotional conflict is that she feels trapped and forced to play this particular role. And that's why, like, again, underneath the gag, that's why the torture works on her, because they could torture her in any which way they wanted. Like, they could harm her and put her in the Iron Maiden and, like, burn her and whatever. That probably wouldn't work on her because she's used to enduring great amounts of pain for extended periods of time. The reason why tempting her with pleasure works instead is because that's the thing that she has missed the most in her whole life for her entire life. That's why pleasure works on her. Right? Like, that's why simple pleasures tempt her so much. It's because she's never had them, ever. But anyway, 'tis time for Torture Princess. Very good manga. I recommend it. First episode was great. Like, really well put together, very well directed, very well judged in the way that it plays out its gags. I don't know that the quality is going to keep up for the rest of the season. Also, this is an experiment. I don't know that I'm going to keep making reactions for all of the episodes. If you want them, let me know in the comments. Assuming you find this video, you probably won't. I don't really know what I'm going to be doing on this channel. Reaction content, I think. Just for things when I just want to fucking talk about them and I don't want to fucking have to do a script or do a whole song and dance production thing and shit. Just want to dump some thoughts out and put them on a YouTube channel, then that's what's going to be happening here. And there's time for Torture Princess. You should watch that anime. It's good. It feels nice. I watched the episode and I was sitting the whole time just like, I want to talk about all these things, and like, but in order to do that, I'd have to make a video about it. In order to make a video about it, I have to fucking battle the YouTube copyright system for like 14 hours, just editing and re-editing and re-uploading versions of it with slightly less or more footage from different things that doesn't get caught by the copyright bots. And like, even then now I'd still get copyright struck when someone manually claims a thing. Didn't want to do it, but I wanted to talk about it. So now I have, and now it's here. I know it's a little awkward, sort of inconvenient way to do reaction content, this, where you have to keep pressing play and pause on your own thing and maybe your thing buffers, and it's like, I know, it's inconvenient, but under the circumstances, it's the best I can think of. Maybe I could put something on the screen as well. Is there a way to play back footage at like a 1 frame rate per second rate or something? Maybe that would fool the copyright bots. I don't know. I don't know if that's possible. If I want to put a little more effort into this, then maybe I will do that. But anyway, good anime. Thank you for hanging out with me, talking about anime for a while. Subscribe to this channel, I guess, if you want to see more of this nonsense that I'm messing around with. And cheers. Bye.